Hey listeners, we got a great episode for you today. I have my best friend Sam Clarke joining us. We just got back from Las Vegas. Sam attended the Worlds IBJJF Jiu-Jitsu tournament. This is a huge tournament. Only the best in the world get invited to compete. We're going to talk about Sam's journey. There's a lot of nuggets in this episode, from the power of persistence to finding opportunity in adversity in life. So check this episode out. You're all going to love this one. Welcome to the Dr. Dad's podcast, where a naturopath and chiropractor come together each week to share lifestyle medicine, health advice, and inspiring interviews with some of the top experts in health and wellness, bringing you the latest in nutrition, exercise, ancient healing, toxins and detox, your microbiome, mindset, hormones, brain, and much more. Stay tuned. We're going to teach you how to experience growth daily.
Hey everybody, it's the Dr. Dad's coming at you. This is Dr. David Wardy, and I'm with my main man, Dr. Nicholas Jensen. And today's a big day for me. I had my two besties on the podcast today. Of course, I get to connect with Dr. Nick every other week now, but I had my best buddy. I was thinking about this again today, brother. It's honestly been, what do we say, like over 20 years. So Sam Clarke is our guest today. Best friend. I've been good buddies with him. We were college roommates and we played college football together, and 20 years later we're still very, very close, probably closer now than ever. This guy's like a brother to me. And I wanted to bring him on today to talk about, this process of, what's the best way to describe this? Sam's been on a journey for the past 3 years. So I just got back from Worlds, and Sam, correct me, it's the IBJ, what's the abbreviation?
IBJJF. So
IBJJF Worlds.
Yep.
Right, in Las Vegas. And so this is a big tournament. If you get invited to Worlds, or you're even able to go to Worlds, you're one of the best in the world. And so Sam was able to go, and he got an opportunity to go to Vegas and compete amongst the best in the world at jiu-jitsu. And I was very blessed that I was able to go and get to be a part of that whole experience with him. But I really wanted to dial in today and talk about the process that he took, because it's been a 3-year journey. But we're also going to talk about a little bit of resilience, because he had something come up right before Worlds that really challenged him. And he really had to dig in for about six months, right, bud? About 6 months, he really had to dig in so that he could actually go to Worlds and compete, because it could have been easy for him to just say, you know what, I got this injury and I'm going to put this off this year, maybe shoot for it next year. But we had a conversation, we talked, and he decided, let's see what we can do here. So Sam, thank you for joining us today, buddy.
Oh, my pleasure. First and foremost, just wanted to extend my appreciation and gratitude to you two gentlemen, Nick, David, and our friendship, man. Thanks for the reminder. 20 years just went by like that and still going. So definitely blessed to have you still be a part of my life in a major way. So definitely want to just say thanks and take a moment to say appreciate what you guys are doing, and thank you guys for having me. And yeah, small caveat, it is the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. They're ran by the Gracie family, big conglomerate. They have a bunch of tournaments throughout the year, both open as well as, certain opens from different territories, Dallas, all over the world, really. So they have a North American tournament. But yeah, this one is significant because it's jiu-jitsu is pretty democratic. You go by weight, rank, and age. But this particular tournament is called Masters Worlds because it is Masters 1 through 8, and I think maybe even above that. But it's really a age group between that kind of 30 plus age group, and then they go by kind of your weight and then your rank in the sense of belt. So definitely a big tournament. It is an international tournament. Many people and athletes come from all over the world to be there for that particular weekend, Labor Day weekend that just passed. So it's a big deal. So definitely appreciate you for the shout out.
I did mention earlier, Sam played college football, right? So we played at UTEP together. So Sam is an athlete. He does have a background of being an athlete, and that's a big part of who he is. And he's always been active. I mean, when we were doing college football, what was the next thing for you, man? You got into running, you've CrossFit. You were running marathons. He's always been doing something, is what I'm trying to get at. There's always been something he he pushes himself to train for or get better at or, grow or evolve. So let's talk about that, man. I mean, we have a history of being an athlete. You're a dad, just like me and Nick. You have a little boy. You're married. You have a full-time job, right? So I really I want you to kind of just touch a little bit about why it's important for you to always be active in your fitness, right? But the other piece of it is what you've learned over time from the time we were college kids. So like being adults now and being a dad, and right, like we have more responsibilities. We don't have as much time. So let's just talk about that first before we kind of get to the other stuff.
All my life has just been about working hard. Working hard for what you get to. Put in, not necessarily smart yet, but hard. Just like put in all your effort. I think that's just a product of upbringing. Everything was kind of not the most fortunate circumstances, and it was just instilled in me to be hard, tough, and outwork everybody. And that's kind of a product of mom and dad always working. So I outworked. Lucky for me, grades played a factor into getting the red shirt opportunity. So they kind of switched their scholarship. Michael Hurd ended up being gray shirt. I ended up getting the red shirt. And then through that journey, I think that's kind of when we met and put on the pounds. And I think, that was the start of kind of health and fitness. You're now in a D1 program. You got a strength and conditioning coach. You're now playing a particular position. You're going to play against, athletes that are, phenomenal in the sense of just athleticism, build, work ethic. And then that's kind of ingrained in us the start of maybe a regimen. And like you said, I wish I would have known a lot of what I know now to kind of instill into that gentleman back then in the day. But, back then it was like, eat as many boiled eggs as you can. Drink a protein shake right before bed. I don't know if it had so many sugars and carbs. I didn't even care about the nutritional value. It was just like, pump this shake, eat these eggs. You're going to be a DT now. I was a DN going in. And I think that year I left at 210 wet, mind you, listed at 225, got the scholarship or the opportunity, did the summer workout with UTEP, and I put on 30 pounds. So I was 240 by the end of summer. This is 2 months after graduating. Then we go into 2-day camp. Then it was like, more training, more intake. Earned the scholarship. Now it's about being a redshirt freshman and being a part of the program, which was wake up, lift. And this is also being a freshman. You're going out to Mexico. It was right there across the border. It was easy access. But, lack of sleep, going to the weight room, probably pissed drunk from being out till 3 a.m. to make a 5 o'clock in the morning workout, eat crappy, go hit it, do your sprints, go to class if you weren't tired. And that's another story in itself. Almost failed out of school because I wasn't going to class because I was just getting used to a routine, getting used to the balance again. But in adjustment, gained 30 pounds in the summer. Through that fall season redshirting, went into December, I gained another 25 pounds. So I was 265 by the end of the year. And it was like, it's still not enough. These guys you're playing against are 300, 320, 340 linemen. And I'm this redshirt freshman, athletic, but I wish I would have chose Robert Rodriguez route and became a middle linebacker and just kind of stayed lean and mean and fast. But it was like opportunity to play. And that's all I had in mind. And I just trusted what they said, trusted what they gave us. Didn't do no research, none. It was just more focused on passing class and go and work your butt off. And whatever strength and conditioning coach said, Sowers or whoever, it was like, just do it. And then it was like, eat what you can, because again, scholarship athlete, yes, blessed to have the opportunity to get school paid for. You didn't get much of a check, and that check quickly got spent. And so what are you spending on? You're probably eating Jack in the Crack, just to get some kind of protein or carb or just, calories, right? And maybe not the best sources. So, by the end of that year, 265, and then getting the opportunity to potentially be a starter and play, I put on then another 20 pounds. And I think my highest I ever weighed in life was like 290. Oof. And then crazy, right?
So I remember you back then too.
Yeah. No neck.
I had cornrows too.
Oh my God. Yeah. So
Sam had
embarrassing.
hair back in the day when
Please
he was
don't do an edit cut to my profile pic and flash that picture. Please don't. Please don't. But yeah, that was the foundation of my start of really nutrition, or the appreciation, or just maybe just like the opening of understanding of what nutrition even meant.
well, a process, right? Just a
Yep.
process to follow over time now.
Yep. So wasn't educated or informed the best to start. So like, you know, it wasn't built on good foundation.
Yeah.
And then, meeting you, we ate better. You know what I mean? We did our best, but that was like first time really appreciating the home cooked meals.
Still didn't eat well though. I mean, we ate
Right.
better, like you said, but we still weren't eating well back in the
Yeah,
day.
like it
And
helped save money because we started to budget for home meals, which was still the best we can do. And I just kind of maintained that. But I think a product of why I went into like CrossFit and all the other things is, one, we just were built on that activity. You're waking up 5 in the morning, you're doing your lifting, you're doing your sprints, then you're going to class, and you come back for meetings, then you're coming. It was just the amount of activity. And when you instill that from high school all the way through college, it's just kind of ingrained, and you get this bio clock, and you just get this, which is probably what's hard about athletes when they leave and they don't get to play at the high level. They keep all of the appetite and do none of the activity. And then that's probably where you get a lot of the health problems. And that was something that I was just cognizant of that's not going to be me. I can't do it like that. And I think also a product of a lot of the injuries. I had 2 shoulder surgeries. I fractured my spondylosis process, my L2 spondylosis process, pulled hamstrings, and then ultimately the best, prep that I had in life in the sense of health, fitness, and, the ability to probably be considered as a free agent. I ruptured my Achilles that same year. And that was kind of the downfall. I think there's probably a bit of like depression that I may have not been aware of just because the way we're built. But, it was a down time where it was just kind of like, now what do I do with myself? I've spent all my life just trying to be this athlete. And where do I go from here? And this was a choice of mine to make a better life for myself and family. And, now it got taken away. So there was some soul searching after that. And, you go through school, you go through season. These were like terrible seasons. You went off, my best friend's gone. My parents I had to see them come to games and not see me play, but still kind of be there and support. Broke up with the long-term girlfriend. Like a lot of it just kind of started hitting the fan. And then all that was left was to just be 9 to 5, find that opportunity, go work, and then, but also be an athlete. Like I'm still 260 now in a cast, walking into the door to my first opportunity with Robert Wingo, looking for a gig to do kind of an internship. And, I look ridiculous. I don't know how to wear a suit. I got this cast on my boot, and I don't have any experience outside of school. And, imagine just trying to interview and say, hey, give me a shot. And then it was at that point of being that big, it wasn't relevant anymore. So, and you're a big part of kind of instilling in me that beginning in time. And I really have to put my hat to David, and I give him my life because he's really what instilled truly the exploration of how to do self-care. If it wasn't for him, I'd be like many, where it's just kind of trust your doctor. Something hurts, you got an ailment. They try to diagnose it. If you're looking for something, they will. And often here's a pill, here's a prescription, and you're off. And, and then you're in this pattern of everything hurts, go to the doctor and prescribe something, or go take the leftover ibuprofen that they gave you for said whatever. So it was just kind of one of those things where I was like, David Wardy gave me the ability to educate myself or research or understand that there's other options. And quite frankly, your body was built to heal and do what it needs to do. So, promote that and explore that. So that was the beginning of the time. And then, I think it started with the chiropractic practice. You opened your business. Hold on.
There you go. So I want to highlight real quick, Sam. No, sorry, real quick, before we keep going, I just want to highlight 2 things because this is important. One, earlier you were talking about persistence, right? And so I read this thing one time, and this is so, it's such a true statement. I think people lose sight of this. It said, being smart will only get you so far. Being talented will only get you so far in life, right? But persistence is that one thing that like will never fail you, regardless of if you don't have talent or you're not as smart, like if you're persistent, right? And so that's a huge one. Like I remember reading that statement. I was actually traveling and I saw it on the wall and I was like, man, so many people just give up, right? They just give up. And there's that persistence is just not there. And the other piece I want to talk about was, you're talking about your journey, and there was a huge identity crisis for you at the end of college before you had to step into the professional world, right? Because you were an athlete, you identified with that as part of who you were, and then, like you said, you got injured, and it was like, what am I now, right? Like that, this path's done, and like I got to move on to another one. And there was a big shift, right? And we were talking about that, and then the athlete never stopped, right? So it's like you said, like it's just a part of who you are, and so there's a continuation into our professional life, but it just looks different. Nick, sorry, buddy, go ahead. I know you have some stuff you want to talk about.
No, it's interesting to hear the journey of anyone who's been an athlete at varying different levels, and especially when we're young, because I think so much of our entire life has been just geared towards optimizing that state of being an athlete. And so talking about just that journey of having to switch gears, it's a tricky one because like you said, it's everything you know. I think there's something to be said for being or finding your confidence, like you said, the persistence inside the uncertainty, because there is no certainty with an athlete, and there's no certainty that you're going to make it through next week without having a sort of a career-ending injury. And so I love how you talked about this transition to more like understanding about self-care and like how the body can heal, and have that being the focus, because it took you into a new path and a new way of seeing your body, and but also a new way to like adapt to the new circumstances of life. So I think it'd be interesting to hear how, like, you became a jiu-jitsu athlete relatively recently, and yet there's all these building blocks and foundation that you created over your lifetime. And so, David, I don't know if you're ready to jump into that conversation, but it's so interesting to think that you're at World Championship tournament, and you just started the sport like 4 years ago or whatever it was. So yeah.
So Sam, give us the cliff notes of like the self-care stuff started up. You got into running for a while. We were running marathons, right? Was that the next thing, marathons?
Yeah, so something you pointed out, and thanks for pointing out.
And guys, he's a big guy, okay? So for our listeners, if you can't...
I'm not that big.
No, but for marathon...
My head is big.
No, I'm not talking big like Sam's fat. Sam's just a tall, wide frame, solid guy. Like you're around him, and I've seen him at his 290, and I've seen him all the way at like 205, okay? Still a big guy, okay? He's just lean now, and he's more lean and muscular. But the point I was trying to make is, I remember when he told me he was going to go into marathon running, and I was just like, you're crazy, dude. Like, we don't run that far. And then I'm thinking, okay, because how much did you weigh when you started running?
Man, so yeah, something you mentioned, just to back up and highlight, because I think it's important, is persistence.
This is part of the process, right?
Yeah.
Like, your body had to change, and I want you to talk about that journey.
And it's persistence. It's that, and you can't appreciate the good without, if you want to call it bad. I don't ever call anything bad. I think it's just part of the process, and that appreciation comes from failing, and things not going your way, and some victories don't necessarily have to feel good. That's a key too. People have this mindset and this fabrication of what wins are, or what good and bad is, or and I think that's what stops people. That's something that we probably would highlight here in this conversation, is that you stop yourself, and you can create whatever you want to create. And I think whether you're a godly person and have this deep faith in that belief, but I think, people get lost in the miracle of things based on, this incredible idea of, 5 bread, 2 fish, or 5 fish, 2 bread, whichever it is. And it fed 5,000 masses, but, that could be the miracle. Yes, if that motivates you, but it could also be the miracle of, in the act of sharing, it brought people together to make this amazing moment. So, I think people just don't have enough don't give themselves enough the ability to expand on the thought of things and what they make them mean. And I think it's that the key there is, yes, persistency, but I think a lot of it isn't here, and a lot of it you can't create here if you don't have this stability and this practice and this regimen to kind of fuel the things that naturally help you create and manifest what your future could be. So yeah,
beautifully said right there, man.
so I think that's a big key is we miss out a lot of that. We can't manifest things because we're not taking care of the things that help us create. And then we see things differently, and then or we're susceptible to what the world will manufacture, society or where you live in your territory. Which another thing I think is travel. Get out, see the world, see people, see how cultures, the Eastern discipline versus West, contrastly different. You know, they really value people and moment and that inner being with each other. And love isn't what we see in the movies. You know, I know we say that a lot, but really we're charged with, you know, which is my love, one of my 5 love languages, affirmation. But a lot of our society is charged with the affirmation and the, oh, this imaginary thing versus what it really is about. So I think people need to check themselves and really ground themselves about how they manifest things and how they think about things. And it's not win or lose. It's not good or bad. It's all good. It's just your journey. And if you quit on it, you'll never see the greatness or the richness of what life can bring you. And life is really too short. You know, it's fleeting that people just get stuck. But, you know, later on that. But again, cliff notes. So after injuring myself, David Wardy kind of helped me a lot. Rehab process, being disciplined with it. I got to really appreciate the practice, chiropractic practice, like getting adjustments and really making sure my system was in flow. And then I think we tapped into optimal health systems.
Yeah, we started doing more supplements, which weren't a regular thing for you. I mean, we took stuff in school, right? But that was all garbage what they gave us back in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah, we started just getting you on a understanding that there's a regimen that you need to be on pretty regularly, and it can change, but like you're always on something, right?
Yep. And then conversation, like, you know, it's funny. Naturally, organically, this kind of helped him, but it was like having someone you could check in with, having someone to inspire each other. I remember the first couple of years, you know, he opened his practice. He had this office, funded it, financed it. We had the bull in the office, which I still think you have. And it was just like, man, ready to go do the world. I had just gotten into my career and took off into another angle, got to Austin, you know, started kind of moved together in this journey together and always checked in on each other. So having somebody to check in and kind of be that voice of reason, so to bounce off ideas and also see our struggles. You know, seeing David struggle for a moment in time. But again, he kept persistent. I had my moment of persistency, and we just always have each other's back to check on that. And then just continuing the health. So CrossFit was a thing. I think I was just into the fad. But for me, weight room was never the thing. Stationary, people flexing, most people are talking. I wasn't a cardio guy either. So I really didn't know where I fit after football. But I had a yearning for the level of activity. But CrossFit just kind of seemed a natural course of action. A lot of athletes transition that. You know, I think what it was is more the competitive nature of it. You know, the fact that you would do a WOD or here was your time, or you have a group of people all hitting it. Oh, he finished. I'm going to beat him next time. I think that was more the you know, passion for it at the time. It was probably less about the weights and how much I was lifting and what it made me look like. It was just more the competitive nature of it and the camaraderie in that and the shared, you know, I guess awareness across the nation that, you know, CrossFit was everywhere and you can go access a gym anywhere. And David kind of tapped into it too. And he took it to, you know, he did a little stint where he was doing CrossFit kind of competition, like bringing the gyms together and, you know, seeing former athletes from UTEP opening gyms, Paul Smith, you know, and doing that exploration and fitness. So that was kind of the transition of that. I got down to like 255. I like that look. I was in Austin, you know, single, starting to kind of shrink the frame. And, you know, it was like, yo, this is a plus. It's kind of hitting all points. I feel good, look good, and I'm getting my competitive spirit, exercised. But after time, we all discovered you're getting older. It's just not conducive to the body,
Yeah.
and why are you going to want to break down? And then what David instilled in me was just this vision of, don't worry about this moment. You're kind of just like your bank account, just like your financial situation. You want to build a health of wealth that is going to sustain you. So when it really time to cash in, you're going to be in a good position. That investment in what you're doing now is what's going to extend your life, sustain your life, make you feel good. Don't look like your dad or look like some of your homies when you go to your 20th reunion. They look like they're 80, you know what I mean? We're 40, or they've died already, or they've picked up corona and, all of it. So COVID and all this stuff was hidden. So really kind of after that, I was like, what can I do that's not so stressful on the body, but still benefited me and gave me some daily activity that I could commit to. But still, I always had this thing of like, I need to do something bigger. I need to push, like, give me a reason. Like, I can't just go and run every day. There's no reason to run, then what am I going to run for? If I'm not doing a competition or something competitive. So yeah, I brought it up to him. I was like, man, marathons, that's a big deal. Ironman, marathons, triathlons. I did a relay for a triathlon, and then it just came like, man, I can't afford the bike. I don't like to swim, but running you can do anywhere. So in this job, fortunate for me, it was kind of fueled both by doing something that was going to give me a kind of a North Star to keep hitting every year, keep me accountable, which, you can't cheat a marathon. That was the thing. If you're not running, it's going to be a disaster. That experience is going to be ultimate. And it's probably what makes people stop. Not a good enough preparation. And then you get hurt. You hurt something. It feels bad. And then you're off. So, and then like for me, my boss, Ben Granados, is an avid runner. He's run like 26 marathons like in a row. So it was just before Elias, my son, was being born, that I was like, I'm gonna do marathons, and then maybe one day he'll run with me. Like, now we're creating the vision of like how you want your family, and how to be the example, not just be speaking to, you should play this, you should do that. I did this. Just like being an example of what that could look like. So I had created, let me do marathons. Plus, it was a feat that was like 1% of the world, I think, or something like that. Some weird stat that like 1% or 2% of people have run a marathon. I had no idea what I was doing or getting into. And that's usually me, just jump into it and commit. So yeah, I built it up. I talked to David, like, what supplement regimen do I need to do to support me? Because I was like 220 when I ran this marathon. And then he was like, okay, do this, do that. We kind of dialed things. We did UCAN, we continue with optimal health systems. So we just like played around, just getting better hydrated. And at this time, I wasn't even doing amino. So this was all just UCAN, clean diet, carb up, and run. Run. And I think that's part of maybe where the meniscus which we'll fast forward in a bit. But I think some of that wear and tear, and it was just not conducive. And so after like my 5th marathon, I was like, man, I really got to do something else, because it was just really challenging to balance work, life, wife, kid. And it was just not conducive to be like, okay, the end of the week has to be 2 long runs. I'm going to do a half marathon on Saturday. And then I got to wake up and do another 8 on Sunday. That's like 2.5 hours of your time. That's like 3 hours of your time. And in some places you had to go, because we got a lot of hills here in Santa Cruz, and it was just taking too much time for family. And it was like, who am I doing this for? Which is getting kind of selfish when you start to kind of wrap your head around of the balance of things. And so it was just like, okay, now it's on to some next phase of things. Like, what else could I explore? And that's part of it. It was just like being adaptable, not so intent on, I have this vision for this thing, without having the vision that this thing can evolve. This thing you can move into another path, and being considerate of who your time and energy is what's worth it, where that investment of time should be. and then balance, and you could find a solution. So I think that was part of the constant evolution, constant having the ability to adapt. So after marathon, one of them pulled a hamstring, didn't finish. So I had to kind of have that comeback just to finish strong. And I think my best one was 4 hours and 40 minutes. And I was like 210. But then after that, I was like, it's not going to get much faster. And no, man, this is just tearing me up. And I lost a lot of the muscle, you know what I mean? Like, it started to have diminishing returns. And that was something that then David discovered again. He's like, okay, all this work, you know, quote unquote on paper sounds great, but you're not really recovering like you need to. You're probably hitting these diminishing returns, and you're plateauing or even, you know, declining in some regard. So we got to kind of find that balance. And so after that, I was like, okay, do shorter runs and then just do kind of HIIT workouts. And then that was it. But then there was nothing to play up to. Like, is there a HIIT competition? You know, is there a short run thing? Nothing. So it was just kind of like a little bit of a lull. But then we started tapping into kind of body hack stuff. And I think from that point on, COVID hit. And then it was like, what are we going to all do? Like, what do I need to do? How do I stay healthy? I didn't take all the vaccinations. I did one because it was a requirement for travel. Funny story about COVID. We were actually got our visas to go do a business trip in Wuhan, which was like ground zero. And so unfortunately we didn't go. And so I knew about COVID before it like actually came to the States, and everybody started to kind of hype and get a bit of the panic around it. So we missed that trip. But yeah, coming out of that, it was just, you know, me and David, we just didn't stop living. The idea of COVID, people staying in their homes, no more school, you know, working from home and all this and that. It just kind of, it didn't sit well with us. And maybe at the time people thought I was a little careless, but to me, you know, careless would be leaving my son, who was just born 2017, 2 years later, he's 3 years old, getting into that stage of social and, you know, time to explore and see the world and discover people and energy. And it just didn't sit well that we were going to be stuck in our homes. So it was at that stage. I had always a fascination of martial arts when I was young, like say that kind of 3 to 7 years old, you grow up with Bruce Lee moves and stuff. But it was this idea that if I was going to get my son involved in something, I didn't want him to play football just because of my personal experience and head trauma, contact, just, you know, if he's passionate about it, he wants to do it, he can choose whatever he wants to. I'll support him all the way. However, I didn't want him to be stuck with that possibility. I wanted to open up his exploration to travel through all of it. But at that time, no one was playing no contact sports. Nobody was organizing any kind of opportunity. So long story short, there's this idea of like, hey, what is the most practical and would be the most meaningful way to start his journey in athleticism or some discipline? And what could that look like? And I just was like, it was jiu-jitsu. So I discovered jiu-jitsu really because I got my son into it. And he actually started before me. So sometimes he brags and is like, I've done it longer than you, Dad. I know more than you. So I'm like, all good. But the funny enough, our professor, who is a Gracie Baja practitioner, did world championships, you know, was kind of one of the, I guess, the founding fathers, let's say, of California that kind of brought that surge. And now it's, you know, world renowned and growing ever more popular. He had a gym nearby. So we were like, yo, let's try this. But because of COVID, we had to do it through Zoom. So believe it or not, our first experience of jiu-jitsu practice was just like this. He'd show a move, explain it on the screen, and we'd be in our garage, and I'd be trying to help Elias figure out 3 years old. And, you know, think of the attention span. He's probably got like 5 minutes of interest, and the rest is like jumping around, messing around, not even involved. And then, you know, we did that for a good 2 to 3 months. And fortunate for us, whether this is on Health Code or not, you know, that small group that was on Zoom, he was like, I'm going to invite you to the gym if you guys are okay with it. Because the only way to learn is to learn. But he was like us. It's like, well, if you're gonna get it, you're gonna get it. But to me, it's like another cold, or take care of yourself and we'll figure it out. But parents were like, we could get down on that, and they wanted to because of the idea of being stuck at home. There was no activity. These kids weren't playing with nobody, talking to nobody but their parents. So it was more of a, we'll do whatever we need to. And then we got into the gym, and it was kind of like this private session, closed doors, not publicized. And then he kind of got his first 6 months in, and right after his 6th month, I was kind of like, man, I'm a dad. You get involved, you get excited, you start kind of picking up things. But at the end of the day, you're like, give them your effort. Let's go. Come on, do this, do that. And after a while, it's like, I sound silly. How am I over here coaching in the background, telling them to do things, and I haven't done it? So then it was like, all right, guess this is the next thing. And then I just jumped in. And then that's the beginning. 3 years ago, actually 3 years ago from that tournament, Dave, was my 3rd year. And in that beginning of August, that's what it took. It was just like, okay. And this is largely, I don't know what motivates everyone, but family, is probably the most priceless, meaningful asset that I have. My son, my wife, that's the drive, that's the motivation. So it just kind of started to build this idea of, hey, what can we experience together? Or if I'm going to be, rather than me trying to tell him, you hear that saying all the time about, what you say to your kids, it's often what are you doing, your actions. So the best lesson in the course of action for me was, all right, I'm going to get involved by my actions. And rather than me try to tell him every day, yes, you're going to mentor your kids and do all that, but the most valuable things he's ever picked up and learned is from seeing me. So then it became very important to not try to be right, just be an example. Whatever that needs to be, you show up, you do it in your actions, and that's where he's picking it up. So that was kind of my entry into jiu-jitsu. And I thought it was going to be this like 1 to 2 days a week, learn some grappling moves, cool. I also was like, I'm 40 years old. What am I doing? Trying to, invert and wrap my legs around people's heads. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Outside of just the general knowledge, but then the community, it hit all the points again. It was, again, something to be competitive with your community. You can go as hard as you want. You can also train as efficiently as you want. Then it was my son's doing it. I can kind of grow into this with him. And then it was a sport that truly you can do in longevity. There's dudes 60 years old whooping boys' butts. It didn't matter what size you were. It didn't matter, how many years you had, how strong you were. It just offers so many pathways of exploration in the art itself that I fell in love with it. And then it became the passion. And then that's what kind of ignited everything after that. It was like, well, cool, fits the schedule. There's a lot of lessons in martial arts, I think, and just sports in general. But in this discipline of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's a lot of things about being humble. It's a lot of things about, it's not win or lose. There's this chess of the body, so it really like clicked a lot of things in the sense of mental space, honor and discipline, and then ultimately self-defense. And then it was this idea of like, hey, I can actually stand my ground in confidence. It gave me this kind of boost in mentality of like, you can be dangerous and you should be, but you don't have to act on that. That's what makes you dangerous, the ability to have control. And then, and I think that's something that's always sprung out. I did land art, and I think that's kind of a genesis of your existence. There's this practice of like, what are 3 moments when you were like a toddler and you can remember that far back, then your kind of teens, and then your early kind of, let's say, college, adult life. I think, and then it's those 3 moments that are also your strengths, but there's a B side to that strength. And I think that's always kind of followed me through life, in the sense of like, I got molested when I was a kid, around 3 to 5 years old by my half brother. And then that kind of created this ability to have to be in control. if you're not in control, you're not safe. So there was like this A to B side of control. You're always in the control. You can go in the room, control your emotions, control your state of being, maintain. But then also being in control can have a negative effect. You know, being over in too much control, not relinquishing anything, and then it kind of puts you in this box to never discover or give room for a loved one to have a voice with you. You know, and then there's this teen age where I was getting bullied. You know, I wasn't the biggest kid. I was mixed, you know, in a predominantly black and Hispanic school. And I was like Filipino Panamanian. And they're like, what are you, Japanese? So with the Asians, I'm too black. With the blacks, I'm too Asian. Mexicans, I wasn't even close. So I didn't really fit in. So it was like a little identity crisis of like, so I had to be a jokester and, you know, find my way in, never really feeling comfortable. And so it created that I need to be a part of a group that's tough. So that's probably where sports came into play. Be a part of a group, you know, that's going to work out. You could be a part of this group and no one's going to mess with you. So be tough. And then probably career wise, the ability to outwork and have to do more, that desperation of it's never going to be enough, probably came when I ruptured my Achilles. Because then it was like what I thought was that's where the journey's going. It's guaranteed. All I gotta do is keep playing. Bam, you get hurt, and then you're like, what do I do now? So it gave all three of those were some vulnerable moments that created strength in myself, but also created a balance of you got to be respectful to both sides. And I think jiu-jitsu helps you kind of understand that, you know, accept that. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu is big on acceptance. You're going to accept the bad position. It's also being in bad positions is then being in control of your emotions, then find the appropriate opportunity to find your way out of it. So there's just so many like life tenets in the art itself that held high value, that kind of maintained this passion for it. And then ultimately the competitive spirit's in there. And then I talked to Dave again. And it's like, Dave, you know, I'm doing this thing. He's like, how many times are you training? I'm like 5 to 6. It's like, and are you sleeping? You know, what are you supplementing with? You know, you can't play at that high level and then expect your daily life and routine to kind of operate optimally. So I started seeing some diminishing returns after my first year, although I was advancing and busting, you know, doing well, you know, moving really quickly through it, really grasping the art of it. But then like the second year, things started to kind of happen. Like the body started falling apart. Wasn't sleeping. I was stressed. You know, I was getting that dip in the middle of the day. So then it was just being very more mindful of my existence and really like being so clean to really tap into how things feel.
Hold on. I want you to say bye to Nick because he's got to bounce, but we're gonna keep recording.
Nick. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, my man. What you're sharing is so important. I was just saying that I really hope that I'm going to bounce, but keep going. And if you could share some more on some of like you shared on the positions and the stress of being in the moment and how that correlates to those life lessons. I think that's so helpful for listeners to really understand that. Because I have a few buddies that are doing jiu-jitsu and they share similar stuff. There's something about the experience of being on the mat with other men or other people. I mean, it's because women too. And there's a very similar sharing that you just got into that I think is really important for people to appreciate. So, but love that you guys are connected. I love what you're sharing. You just blessed the listeners in so many different ways today, and hope we get a chance to meet in person. I'll just avoid the headlocks and the neck locks and all those things.
No, none of that. None of that. No,
well, I wouldn't mind rolling with you, man, but you're gonna have to show me some moves so I can actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what it's all about. The sharing.
All right, brother.
All right, take care.
Okay. David, see you tomorrow.
Love you, bro. See you tomorrow. So let's expand on this real quick, bud. So, I mean, like Nick was saying, martial arts is beyond the physical. It has taught you a lot of life lessons. And really, you know, what you were describing about, you know, getting in these tough positions on the mat, you know, and feeling like you're losing control or, you know, you're beat, you know, because you're on your back, then understanding that there's opportunity there and you're not necessarily beat. And it's interesting that you brought that up because you've experienced that in life. I don't know how many times. We all have. And it's interesting how people handle those types of situations, right? Like some people completely fold when there's resistance in life or they're hit with something big, like some of the things you've described in your life. And it affects us all in one way or another. And how that is going to affect your journey, I think, is a little different for everybody. But the reality is like you're saying, this persistence piece of just moving forward is kind of the solution to all that, right? Like, yes, life's going to hit you. It's going to knock you down sometimes. You're going to get hit with stuff, but you just got to keep going, man. And like, I'm listening to your journey, and like, you've been hit with so many things in life and had so many times where you had to find that next thing, or it was time to level up, and you found awareness in that space with whatever that was. Like you're saying, you don't see it as bad, but you found awareness in that type of energy that growth and evolution was needed. And it's that persistence that gets you the growth and evolution, but you're learning the lessons as you're moving along, right? So I love that piece. And then let's talk about in that fact of learning these lessons, because part of your process, you've had to, over the years, really dissect it and say, okay, well, there's a better way to do this, right? Like, I've been doing it this way. It's given me this result. Now let's evolve it or grow it, and let's see what that does. And we've done this over the years, for 20 years. So you were overtraining in jiu-jitsu, right? And you realized you were overtraining because your body started to feel it going into year 2, roughly, yeah? And so what happened then? Where were we at? We switched gears? Did we back off? We were training less? Like, what did you say?
I'd say first year, it was all the magic, taking all that I've built, which is also a thing. A lot of the ingredients of all those experiences allow this experience to become what it was. The CrossFit training, the football, size, strength, the CrossFit, the repetition, the quick twitch, moving weight, body, full body, in a way. The running, the stamina, the breathing, So it's kind of funny. That first year was probably, I don't not say by chance, but having all of that in the sense of foundation set me up to be a really good position to train, like to be a jiu-jitsu practitioner in that regard, because it kind of put all the pieces together. You're moving weight, you're using your full body. My breath was great because I ran marathons, so I could really carry the frame, and it actually was a little less. Being on the mat was a lot easier, let's just say, because I'm not having to run miles, and nor am I having to do a WOD. It was just kind of the right balance of things. So first year was kind of like got my blue belt in 8 months. I was training 5 to 6 times a day because I just loved it. Was getting in, and naturally, just the athleticism with no refinement was helping me overcome things. And that's the thing in jiu-jitsu. You could be a white belt, but if you're like 200 pounds and then you got a purple belt that's like 160, in a way you go up and he goes down, and that kind of naturally averages things out to make you guys probably more even, because he has to handle your weight and strength while you got to handle his technique. So that's what I loved about it too. No, there was never, let's just say, unfair advantage for anybody. Anybody can train with any size, any weight, any age, and that was my love for it, was that, I could come in here and do these things with these many people, and over time. And then I started learning how to practice different. First, I was going in hard, smashing, and really trying to use the strength and wrestle and overpower. And then in time, you realize that none of that's actually necessary. There's the art itself is the path of least resistance, and being able to handle high pressure situations and escape. So that in the sense of foundation is what enlightened me and put everything that we've learned and discussed and kind of put life and practice together in a discipline. And that's what kind of ignited things. But then in the second year, it was probably the lack of supplementation, because I truly ignored anything strength. So coming off a marathon probably diminished and gave me some atrophy in some of the muscle structure. And I didn't use it to that level in the sense of running, because it was just a single motion, let's say a stride. But then in jiu-jitsu, you're using, you're pulling, you're pushing, you're bridging, you're using your core. And I think a lot of that lack of stability is where kind of the wear and tear started to probably compound and develop more. So in that second year, same amount of days, same practice, but I wasn't supplementing. I wasn't, and my sleep was horrible. I'd do maybe 4 to 5 hours a day. And then I would be working 14, 16 hours a day, and then it was just on all the time. And then, that I think over time and that next year kind of gave me a little bit of the blues. Although I was competing and having success and finding my way through it, I just wasn't supplementing the body and helping it recover to play at the level that I somehow, had a maybe an off viewpoint. Like to me, it was like, oh, this is just every day and this is fine. I love it. And that's what I think maybe fueled the practice of it. But I needed to generate the logic and the practical, being more practical about, hey, you are doing it this much. It may feel normal to you, but if you look on paper, you need to really, come to terms with the amount of output that you're putting and the amount of wear and tear or even, output, just in the sense of what you're demanding of your body. And you can get like this for a time, but then it kind of reminded me the same as with the marathon running. There's a point where you're pushing so much, and if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to get diminished returns. So naturally, with both lack of technique as well as lack of taking care of the body, I got in this triangle position hold where I was holding my leg across the back of someone. It's like triangle. People look it up, they can see the position, but you're supposed to be at more of a perpendicular angle versus head on. And I was head on. And I was holding so tight on the knee and also wrapping around the gentleman's head I was training with. When he opened up the knee, it made this ripple sound. Like so much so, maybe the adrenaline and being all warm, it rippled. It didn't hurt, but it was loud enough where it's like, did I rip your pants? And I was like, no, it was my knee. I was like, but it feels fine. And then it kind of was stiff for a week, but then, you keep going because that's jiu-jitsu too. You lose a limb or you've had to find another way to practice. And there's so many routes in jiu-jitsu. That's another reason why people love it. It's like, oh, I hurt my wrist, but I could play with this. Or this knee's not hurting. Now I shouldn't go in that position, but there's another position. So there's all these routes to travel to maintain your practice, which I think is something why people appreciate and have longevity in it. And then that injury happened, and I think it was like 6 to 8 months. It just started getting worse. But in that 6 to 8 months, I wasn't supplementing. I didn't have aminos in the system, as a dietary portion of my regimen. I was maybe doing a whole like kind of one of those whole vitamins a day. Every now and then, Muscle RX and OptiNitric, and I wasn't lifting any weights or kettlebells or hits, doing none of that foundation. So I think that was probably the biggest lesson in reality, which is, hey, again, another dip in a adverse moment, but turn it into a victory, because then it kind of reminds you, like, through the tragedy, you have the fortunate ability to now improve on that, fix it, take the responsibility of it, be accountable for it. And I had to be accountable with, I wasn't taking care of myself. And you would remind me too, hey man, let's be real. You're doing this 5 to 6 times a day. People don't do that on a normal basis, Sam. And you're competing in tournaments. And you're at this age. Let's come to terms with some things. And if you're going to continue to do that, and that's your choice, then do the appropriate, things to take care of yourself. And I think that's when it became, okay, we're going to do aminos, electrolytes. We're going to drink more water. We're going to get some sleep, because that's ultimately where I'm recovering. Give yourself recovery days. Don't go so many in a row. Find that balance of time. And that's kind of then the adjustment kind of came by way of both your voice, but also by something happening, this tragic moment. And I say tragic, it's not life-threatening, but the idea of like, yeah, I had to come to terms, man. It was kind of depressing. You had to sit out for a couple weeks. I wasn't working out. The mind starts to play on you a little bit, weigh on you from being this high level output and practice to then being on your butt. And then you start kind of getting a little bit of the cuckoo in here, right? And then, on top of it, it was like, man, I was playing so strong. This game was so strong. This way I was defeating people I was, getting joy of that. But now I had to be humble because now I'm getting beat because I can't do that move anymore. Or I hadn't trained enough on the other side to be familiar with it. So it just opened new pathways, which blessing, because if you continue to be persistent, you don't give up on that moment, it becomes even something greater than you could have imagined by way of just being committed to this process. You got hurt. Now you got to do yourself a favor, get right. Now I'm learning about that injury and learning about some of the practice, open up some exploration or research on alternatives. I didn't go under the knife. I explored PRP. I did the PRP injection. So that's probably another thing. Do your research. Get a second opinion. Get out there and understand the system a bit. Although our health system has some positives, in reality, we're far behind in a lot of practice and things that are just baked in for greed and money and not in your best interest. So take the opportunity to invest in yourself and invest in educating yourself or finding a group or a source to help you educate yourself, to just open up your mind on other ways to utilize your body and empower it to do what it's meant to do, and trust the process and take your time, be patient. So I think after the injury, and then it started to click, pop, a bit of a dark time, had to pull back on practice. I was well into my blue belt then.
Well, that was
Just
what?
everything
Was that the fall or was that the beginning of the year?
It was year 2. It happened the fall.
It was in the fall.
A year happened. A year happened. I got my blue belt, 8 months. And then maybe 2 months after that, 3 months after that, busted my knee. Okay. But it was a weird one. It was kind of like a ripple effect. Oh, what was that? Okay, maybe it was some joints and cartilage, but more popping maybe, but not what you would think it is. And then continue to train, but continue to train at the same, regimen and same way. And then when it started popping and clicking is when I hit you up and said, man, this is not getting right.
But that was that the beginning of this year or the end of last year?
It was the beginning of this year.
Okay. So so we had like 8 months.
Right. Well, that's when the start of like, man, something's not right.
Yeah.
And so then I'd say summer is when it was after a couple of turnings. Okay, it was that summer I was like, yo,
that's right.
I don't know if I'm going to make this World Masters tournament, and it's getting worse.
Well, let's talk about that. So Sam was aware he had a knee issue, and he was still training. He was still doing his thing. And then, like he said, he was getting it worse. So he reached out to me. We started talking about, needing to change the process. So you changed that process pretty much from the beginning of the year all the way to Worlds. But even in that time period, you had what, one more tournament?
Yeah,
and then you had
2 tournaments.
2 tournaments in the same year still. So you still had 2 tournaments you had to go and do well in to get to Worlds. And then we still didn't know if Worlds was even going to be a thing. Because
I actually sat out one tournament that I should have done before the Worlds, but I sat out because I had a setback. Right. I re-injured it, and it locked up a little longer than I was comfortable with. And then it was really loose and unstable. And then it just became like problematic. Every movement in jiu-jitsu started to kind of stress it or impact it in some way where it was like clicking or sticking and being too loose. And it was just, I wasn't able to kind of be in full practice. Even so much so, my professor was like, hey, if this is the way you're practicing, I don't know if you're going to be ultimately ready, because people are going to bring their best. And you're really functioning at like a handicap level that's noticeable. So it was a little discouraging to even hear it from him. And he's all about like push through, but being on the mat, you can't hide a whole lot. and then it became that. So then I'd say I did the tournament, and then I did one where I was feeling a little better, where it was like healed up, not as stiff, and I could remember you helping me do stretches, and I could get back into closed guard and posture up with no problem, but not enough to put compression on it. So I had to play very safe, like super safe.
But we had a plan, right? I mean, it was like, okay, let's not stress it. You talked about getting into your positions on the mat and still working more on the mental game.
Mm-hmm.
You were going about half speed when you were training as far as the sparring. But you were really focusing on what? We decided, okay, we need to focus on strength, stability, mobility. We need to work on the knee, the hips, the core. Like, let's support this. You got PRP. You started doing peptides. What else were we doing? You got some other therapies done. You were seeing a chiropractor.
I did chiropractor. I did laser.
Physical therapist was doing soft tissue. I mean, Sam started really before Worlds. He really had to buckle down. He understood that, and he started getting care pretty much every week. I think at that point he was seeing practitioners and just really working on his body. And it was one of those things where, like, I remember you coming to me and being like, oh, this one guy at my gym just dropped out of Worlds. He's not going to go. Some other guy got injured. And we were talking about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Sam never gave me this hint of like, oh, I'm just going to throw in the towel, man. It's probably not a good idea. Like, his knee started to do better as we approached Worlds. Like, it went from that bad place to it started getting more stable. Your pain scale started coming down. You felt more confident, right? And you started to see, okay, yeah, like let's go out, let's give it a try. I think I can do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So take us to Worlds, man. So now we're at Worlds. We had to really change that process to get ready.
PRP was kind of the start of that.
Yeah, and I mean, you went injured into this tournament. That's the big thing I want the listeners to hear. I mean, he had an injury. He wasn't hurt. He actually tore his meniscus. So I mean, there was an actual injury there. We were addressing it, and then he went into full competition against these guys. I mean, I was there. These guys were ridiculous, man. I mean, some of those guys, I was looking at them like, holy shit, like. But it's kind of like you said, right? It's not about strength. It's really about that headspace.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's the plus. I think after PRP, it was still in question because even for the doctor, he's like, "You're doing this." And I'd say he was like, man, 4 to 6 weeks, if that, to get into regular exercise. And then I don't even want you sparring till 90 days. And 90 days was the day of the tournament. So I was like, damn, this might not time out right. So it was easier enough to just take that as the reason and say, okay, doctor said 90 days, guys, just can't do it. But I had been working so hard and had this, I wanted to do it the year before even. And I had this goal of like, I want to do 3 belts in 3 years. That's pretty, it's very rare, but it's possible. And part of that possibility is because if you're competing at that level and you beat all the blue belts, it's just natural. How can they deny you the, validation that you are a purple belt? But that was in the back of my head. But the bigger goal was like, you know what? One, it just would be due to sitting on my ass would not help. And part of jiu-jitsu in practice is, finding a way, resilience, discipline, but technique. And here, like, just go do it to go not prove anything to anyone. I didn't tell a whole lot of people at that point. I wasn't pumping it to nobody. It was just kind of an own personal, if you show up and get on that mat, that's a win for yourself. And do the best you can do from utilizing technique and being smart. And then, so 4 to 6 weeks, I did the 3 days off. Then, and I just took it day to day, 1 week at a time, and really trust the system and really be perfect about the regimen, the recovery. And then it taught me something about training. I didn't have to go hard. I could still effectively train and use the discipline and use technique without having to overexert, which was a whole nother endeavor in itself. Like, man, you know, I'm learning these new positions. It's actually opening up my game. Although there's some positions that I just couldn't do and had to accept failure, but it wasn't ever failure because it's always 50-50 in jiu-jitsu. They get this side, you can get this side. He does this move, there's an escape. I do an escape, there's a counter. So there's just this idea of it started to really open up my headspace of truly appreciating technique and the possibilities and the ability to kind of navigate through it all. So then it was like, wow, okay, I'm not getting all the roles I can at that high level, but I certainly getting the value from roles. I was getting a bit more of the efficiency from the role. So then it went to 2 weeks. Then I was bending, flexing, already doing some body weight kind of stuff. And then that's truly when it turned up to do more body weight. Doing my dynamic lunges, doing goblet squats, get into horse stance, hollow pose, hangs, core exercises, and just really building it up one day at a time. You know, recovery, drinking my aminos religiously, you know, hitting the peptide. Then it opened up researching other peptides. Like, what's a continuation once this treatment's done? What can I continue to supplement that might help promote more healing? Yes, no one can compare to David Wardy in the sense of practice and you know, theory, in what he offers. But I also got to get out of my own way of just, but it's better than nothing. So I had to utilize whatever I can obtain here to kind of help in the process. And if I continue to tell the story, which I still have, I never get the treatment done. So yeah, not the best chiropractor, but he's a chiropractor. He's giving me adjustments. Laser therapy, cool. It's the only resource he has. It was affordable. Do it. Research some peptides, ran it by a source of knowledge, Wardy. And then you gave me the 411 on this yes, this no, check out this one. Got on that as a continuation from the injections that the doc added to the treatment. Then religiously, just building up from body weight to then kettlebell to then get into a place of strength. And then it was a bit of an experimentation in on the mat of like, ooh, that's not feeling good, so I better not do that move. And really getting self-aware of position and feeling. And like, I never tuned in as much. Oh, I also stopped smoking. I used to be an avid, you know, cannabis smoker, which, you know, no, nothing against it, but it's probably the opportune time just to take a break. But yeah, cut that out. And then it was really being self-aware. I really was tuned in to, I don't know, neural system. Like, I could feel the tip of my toenail all the way up at the top of my head and really kind of see whatever I ingested and whatever supplementation and the ability to work out, I could really tune in and be self-aware. So when I was in motion on the mat, it wasn't just the thrust, and it was like, oh, the placement of things. Like, you know, like the best example I could give you is when they tell you to lift up heavy objects, don't lift it with your back. You tune in, now you're lifting it with your legs, and you're connecting, then then you get a better lift.
Yeah.
That's the way I had to start approaching my practice on the mat. It couldn't just be strength and natural ability and athleticism to get by. It was more methodical. It was more thought through in the motion of the battle, which is a whole nother, I mean, strength. It helped my mental, bar none. Like, I feel like that's what soldiers do. You know, real people who go fight in wars, that ability to kind of be methodical and locked in and aware of surrounding, aware of your physical state to control it and slow the speed down and be able to kind of really travel amongst the body and find success. So then it was like, okay, that's positive.
So you
and then I
found,
started getting stronger.
well, but I mean, you're talking about all these gifts that were found from adversity, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you were given adversity, you could have quit multiple times, not just once. I mean, we're talking about probably 4 or 5 times you could have just said, this isn't going to happen this year. But you kept learning these lessons and you kept growing. And I didn't even know some of this stuff, buddy, that you're sharing me right now. And I'm just thinking, because I was there when you competed, all of everything you're describing got you ready to compete. It made you better. probably
better.
than you would have been if you hadn't had to go through this process before Worlds. I
I
honestly,
probably would
and I don't want to
have
say
been
that,
100%.
but
No, really.
you may not have performed as well because you didn't find that awareness. You didn't have to do these things. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? So it's interesting to hear. I mean, like even the body awareness, the way you're describing it, I can totally feel you on that because I've had injuries before, and when any athlete that's had an injury knows that, like when you're trying to still train when you're injured, the awareness of your body is through the roof. You can feel everything because you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to baby what hurts and you're trying to move
Mm-hmm.
certain ways. And so I can see how that translates to the mat very much so with jujitsu, man.
Yep. It made me more methodical, maybe be more efficient. It made me really focus on the placement of things and the positioning of things, which if I was 100%, I probably would have just foregoed even the thought process that to just use the God given ability to power through those moments versus it really helped me be centered and grounded in that foundation. And then I just kept building on that. And then I'd say, got my checkups a couple times. He was like, "You're progressing great." I didn't necessarily embellish like I'm training, but I said I was drilling. But I was getting light sparring in, but I knew what positions I could be in, what I didn't. So the symmetry kind of, I guess, practice of like work out this side of the body, this side will kind of catch itself up. So I did a lot of that, and you know, the only thing I may have been missing was the stamina rolls where you're actually getting in and getting in the sweat and really doing a lot of movement and activity to kind of get the heart rate and flow of that. But, all things considered, it was my best tournament to date. Granted, a little additive to that, we continue to do the practice. You continue to give me guidance on the types of stretches and the things that kind of activate the knees, the glutes, the muscles in and around it, loosen up certain muscles to help provide that mobility. And then, what motivated me too, granted, was I didn't tell a lot of people because, my biggest thing to peeps is like when you're onto something that's bigger than yourself or you're going to challenge yourself, move in silence. You don't need to share every post of I'm working out on the mats today or, leaving workout or look at what I'm drinking. And none of that shit matters. Like it only should matter to you and you should keep that focus on you. And yes, you might be excited and you want to share the world but there's a bit of vanity behind that and there's also a bit of lack of confidence because if you're confident in what you're doing, go do it. Get it done and then speak all about it then. Bringing people along the journey, it could dissuade you because then people are liking, giving you a false sense of security, or you're trying to get some sense of fulfillment. If you're not motivated in just the practice in itself, then you're not truly in it for the right reason. You need to get yourself out there, move in silence, go do what you got to do or you set your goal on, and then you speak on it. Then you share it with the world. Then you can really attribute the journey and say, hey, man, this was an experience. And then you can appreciate really what it was versus every day making a post about it. So I didn't tell a lot of people. I didn't tell family, didn't tell friends, I didn't tell the jiu-jitsu peeps. I told a small few because it was like, hey, if you can be out there, yeah, I would love to support. And it'd be a good weekend for us to all catch up and spend time. But then also that was kind of the motivation. My man David's going to be out there. My cousin Tanya just lost her dad. It's her birthday. She needed a reason to just get away. And then I had my family. Cool. That was just enough. And yeah, if I broadcast the world, maybe the next one, hey, everybody come out. Now I've done it. But since I never done it, I kind of kept it very close to chest. And then when we got there, I was just I got the jitters, the natural anxiety stuff. And and also I left Germany out for a business trip inflated. I was like 227 and I needed to be 222 and under in my gi, which is like 5 pounds. So I was like, wow, where did all this weight come from? And I trained out in Germany too.
All the flying, man.
Yeah. So it was just something that, there's just moments along the way that you can't plan for and you got to kind of embrace the situation and take the opportunity to see your way through it versus be pushed back about it, be discouraged about it, blame, why me, which is often the case versus, it's just part of the journey. And I tell people victories don't always have to feel good. They don't, because we hype victories up so much that then you can't even recognize that's a win. That, yo, man, you got some weight to gain off. That's a win. It's going to make you work out. It's going to make you take ownership. And I think that's the most important thing, is the accountability of that. In that moment, being able to turn on the accountability. You're not turning on excuses. You're not turning on, dumb reasons or pointing the finger at yourself or someone else. You just take the accountability and you move through it. And I think that's the benefit and the start of anything. Being responsible. People think accountability has to be I'm so horrible. Oh, screw this. I did this to myself. Oh, there's no turning back. I'm gone way too deep. Why did it start now? Shut it all down and take the victory in that. It's time to be accountable. I could be responsible for it. And if you see that through, man, it's the thing. It's the magic.
Well, and it's the self-talk, right? I mean, you just described some people, the self-talk they'll have with themselves and the way they talk to themselves, which I tell people all the time. If you talk to other people the way you talk to yourself, sometimes you probably wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah.
Some people talk horribly to themselves. And
big time. Subconsciously, not even aware sometimes.
Yeah, and your words are energy, everybody. Everything that you're talking about to yourself, you're either lifting yourself up or you're beating yourself down or you're talking yourself out of opportunity in life. And, what Sam's talking about is like all these things, he had plenty of reasons to quit. He had plenty of reasons just to say like, nah, I'm done. This isn't with it. But he took all of those and instead of just folding and throwing in the towel, he said, where's the lesson in this?
Yeah.
How am I going to grow? Okay, so let's do it. Let's see what happens. And you learned so many lessons out of that process of just having to persist through all of this. You saw those as opportunities, which, again, it's the way you want to frame it, right? And
there's a gift. There's a gift in that.
And that's the gift.
You go through it, you get to discover that gift.
Yeah.
You get through it. And even then, you're not going to be perfect in every competition. Most cases, you're going to have some ailment. There's something in the way. And that's the perfect moment. It's just, that's the moment was meant to be that way. And you just have to see it as that. Like most guys, even in the gym, this finger's hurting. I got this pull muscle or this ailment here, this thing, or I don't feel good. And they think that's all that has to check before they can go. And in real life, real things, no, man. It is perfect as it is.
Well,
you're here. You have opportunity.
Oh, yeah, but it's never the exact way you need it. And
exactly.
I love it that you're talking about this, man, because I feel like so many people, they miss out on opportunities or they don't move forward when they should, right? Because it's like, oh, well, this isn't the exact right time. Or, well, but this needs to be this way before I do that. And sometimes you just have to take the leap of faith, man. And like you're saying, make yourself accountable and just say, okay, this situation isn't ideal, but maybe this is what it needs to be because there's a lesson that needs to be learned and there's going to be a gift at the end of it. And,
yep.
And it's kind of like what you were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. You said, if people sometimes would just sit with these things enough and look a little deeper, that a lot of times that they would find those answers in their decision making. But
big time. And it ended up being the most incredible weekend in so many different ways,
and buddy, the thing I love about this too, and I got to bring this up, is you got thrown another curveball. Because in each of the tournaments Sam competed at, the max matches you did was what?
Usually it's like 2, which is enough. They're like 6-minute matches. Imagine you're rolling with the 222 guy that probably was 230 that dropped weight, going at his full strength. Like these guys are coming at you like a fight.
And you get how much of a break though? You get what?
You get like 5 to 10 minutes, maybe.
All right, so for our listeners, I don't know if you've ever grappled or done wrestling for 5 minutes straight, but it is one of the most exhausting things you can do. So I had to. We're at Masters, and I'm watching Sam, and he did these 5-minute rounds, right?
They were 5 minutes, yep.
And then they'd be done, but then he'd have maybe 10 minutes, and then he'd have to be back on the mat again, go another 5 minutes straight. And he had 5 matches he did in a row like this. So once he started his first match, he didn't get like an hour to like catch his breath. Like he had minutes to catch his breath between each match, all the way to the finals. I remember you got off your 4th match, and they like moved you to another table, and even they came up and they were getting ready to start, and they said, "Hey," they asked you a couple questions, and they're like, "Oh, we'll give you 10 minutes." And I think you got an extra 10 minutes, but you only really had like 15 minutes total.
I maybe got 10, barely, because
Yeah, 10 total.
another factor is if you didn't compete in an IBJJ throughout that year, you get placed. So I was already on the lower end of the bracket in the sense of rank, which means that I had to compete with all the best guys up front.
Yeah,
And
so
then-
Sam you weren't seated at the top. You ended up, the last 2 guys that you went against were the top 2 seeds.
Yep, first match was, I was like ranked 21 of 30. First match was a number 8 guy. Second match was a number, and he won his match. I think he was like in the top 10 as well. Third match was the first ranked guy that had a bye for the first match. So I fought 2, he fought 1.
Right.
And he was just,
he was fresh. You weren't.
Yes. Then the 4th match was a guy that was probably on TRT, like CrossFit.
Oh yeah,
crazy.
that guy. I'm gonna say it. Homeboy was roided out, but it was very obvious he was not natural.
He was not, and it didn't feel natural. So that was kind of a bit of another challenge.
Well, and you had to, and the interesting thing though is he muscled and you didn't. I remember watching that match, and I thought, man, this guy's muscling his way. He thinks he's gonna outmuscle you, and you just hung with him, man, and you didn't muscle him back, and you ended up winning that match.
Which is another thing, just again, the validation of, I'm changing, by the way, just going to get ready to coach jiu-jitsu for the kids. But yeah, it was another thing to be mindful of. Again, in practice, you don't need all that. And that's another thing that discourages people. It's like, man, I'm older. There's guys that's on roids and this and that. Like reality, there's always an equalizer. There's always something that could put you in a winning spot at any moment of the match. He could get tired. You may not be. He may be stronger, but he's not going to flex 5 minutes straight.
Well, and the reality of that match is what happened. He tried to flex for 5 minutes straight. He lost his head, and you didn't. And because he lost his head and you didn't, you beat him on points.
Yep.
And then, and I want our listeners to understand, Sam, if you didn't hear him, he was ranked 21 out of 30. So he had to work 3 times as hard to make his way up to the finals than anybody else that was seeded earlier. These other guys got more time between matches to rest. Sam basically had to do 5 matches in a row, work his way from the bottom of the brackets all the way to the top guy for the last match within an hour, probably.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah, I mean, buddy, it was a beautiful thing just to watch that whole process, right? And then Sam finished in his second match, went head-to-head with this guy. This guy that he went with had already been pretty much fully rested. And
he had a bye, too.
So you're watching them get on the mat. Sam was still trying to catch his breath. This other guy had a bye. He just walks in on the mat. And honestly, man, you did amazing. Sam finished with a silver podium finish. He got second in his age range at Masters. And honestly, with everything we're talking about, buddy, amazing. I mean, amazing. I mean, just to get to the podium with everything that you had to deal with before that tournament is amazing, buddy. And again, I've told you this, but it was beautiful to be there to watch you and just to see all your hard work and how it paid off for you and just to be part of that experience with you. But again, man, like so many things today, and we got to wrap it up, bud. But so many things today. I mean, so many nuggets.
Part of this,
yeah, from persistence. So there's the medal. So for our listeners, he's actually showing the big ass medal he won, but it was awesome. So it was it was neat for me to be part of his process. But Sam, thanks for sharing this with our listeners and helping them get so many nuggets today, man, from persistence to accountability to seeing opportunity in things that you consider maybe bad or discouraging, or things that you could give up on, and actually maybe seeing the opportunity in them. You gave so many nuggets to our listeners, man. So thank you so much for coming on and just hanging out. And I wish Nick could have hung out a little bit longer, but he probably had to jump on with another patient.
Yeah, we could do it again, man. This is just like friend talk, and
Yeah,
you know, thank you for the opportunity. Love you unconditionally, my brother.
love you too.
And you being out there was a even greater impact, in the sense of, yeah, you know, you helped me maintain the mindset, the breathing, staying centered. We're exchanging energy across the mat, and just having you guys there really empowered me to kind of tap into a space that, honestly, I wish I had this when we were back in the athlete times, but you know, I'll embrace it.
Buddy, even better, we're in our 40s. It means more now than it does back then, because look at what you accomplished in your 40s with everything else you have to take care of and responsibilities in life. I mean, it's awesome, buddy. So beautiful, man. I mean, just beautiful to just watch the greatness and just see you doing your thing. And I hope that our listeners today got a lot out of just hearing about that journey.
Takes a village, and definitely, if you guys are listening, you know, again, I'll say it again and again and again, and for the rest of my life, this gentleman, this soul, this spirit is really the if you want to call it success, but he's definitely been a very impactful part of this journey and continues to be. And I have so much love for him and his family, his beautiful wife, my godson, Nick. Pleasure finally meeting you, and definitely we'll see each other again and spend some time. And you know, yeah, you know, I hope the share was meaningful, and you know, stay tuned for what this young man is doing in life and doing for people. It's miracle work, honestly, and couldn't do it without you. And I love you so much, and thank you. I'm very grateful and appreciative to have spent these 20 years of life with you. It's been invaluable.
Right back at you, buddy. I love you too, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Dr. Dads and share with your family and friends. You can also follow and interact with Dr. Nick and Dr. David on Facebook and Instagram for a daily dose of inspiration and the latest in health and wellness. Be well.